Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When I was trying to get this podcast off the ground, I had a lot of questions. How do I record an episode? How do I get my show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other places people like to listen? How do I make money from my podcast? Well, the answer to every one of these questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now, Anchor can match you with great sponsors too, so you can get paid to podcast. For instance, my podcast is about distributing information to everyone about relationships. And I love this app because all I have to do is press record, and then I post it. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast and making money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast.
This show, we have a very special guest, Mr. Steven Robinson. How are you doing today?
I am doing amazing. How about yourself?
I'm doing really good. I know that we've been trying to book something with you for some time now. You're a very well-known and popular relationships coach and author. Would you be willing to share a little bit more about yourself?
Well, first off, before I do that, I want to thank you so much for allowing me to be on your show. It is such an honor. I definitely love the content that you put out. So for the fact that I'm able to be on your show, I'm greatly, ecstatic, I should say. But a little bit about me, as you know, my name is Steven Robinson. I'm a relationship coach. So I've been a relationship coach for about a year and a half. And the reason why I became a relationship coach is because I was in 2 long-term relationships that ended in heartbreak and turmoil. And one of the things that a lot of people do when they get a heartbreak, they start to blame the other person, right? But for me, I said, well, you know what could I have done better? Although I didn't lie, although I didn't cheat or anything like that, there were still other things that I could have done better. So that's actually how I started to become a relationship coach, because I started studying relationships just strictly to see what I could have done better. Then I started putting out little quotes here and there and started making little videos. And then, my videos started gaining traction. And somebody said, well, you know what, you should go back to school and become a relationship therapist. And if you know anything about me, I have 2 degrees. So I didn't want to go back to school. I was all schooled out. So somebody said, you know what, you could become a coach. You don't need a degree to become a coach. So I thought about it for a while, and, that's kind of how I got into that. But with that being said, through my research, I found out that there were a couple of ways that you can build a better connection with your spouse. So with that being said, I actually ended up writing a book called Revolutionize Your Relationship, 7 Fundamentals to a Better Connection with Your Spouse. You can find that on Amazon. You just type in Revolutionize Your Relationship and it should come up. So it's not a long read at all, but that's one of my most proudest things. But I coach people all over the United States. I have clients in California, Florida, Michigan, anywhere you name it. I'm starting to coach people outside of the United States as well. So that's kind of what I have going on. And I've been featured on a few podcasts. And, like I said, one of the ones that I'm on that I'm ecstatic to be on is yours. So that's what I got going on.
Oh, man, I appreciate that, first and foremost. And yeah, I definitely was actually looking at your book and everything going through it. And I would definitely be one of the first people to purchase it after listening to this podcast, of course. And I'll be spreading that, of course, on any channels that I have, because I already know that you're about to bring some fire to the Lovebirds today. So today's topic, Lovebirds, is the importance of forgiveness. And I'll repeat that. It's the importance of forgiveness. And you know how we do. We go straight into the questions. So I'm going to go ahead and drill you, Steven. You ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right, man. So question number 1, what would you say is the consequence of not forgiving someone?
Okay, well, I think that's a very good question. But first and foremost, I would like to explain what forgiveness is versus what it's not in order to answer the question more efficiently. Is that okay with you?
Oh, of course, of course.
Okay, so being a relationship coach is not exactly a relationship therapist, right? But my therapist friend defines it as a conscious, deliberate decision to release feelings, resentment, or vengeance towards a person or group, whoever hurt you, right? Regardless of whether they actually deserve it or not. So that's basically what forgiveness is. But what forgiveness isn't is it doesn't mean denying the offense or even condoning it, right? So by holding on to the desire of unforgiveness, have you ever heard that saying that says, if you hold on to that, it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die? Yeah, so so that's definitely what it's like. So I want you to understand that if you hold on and not forgive the other person, you could become yourself. These are a few characteristics that you can become. You can become prideful, right? You could become angry. You could become resentful, bitter, vengeful, like hostile, judgmental. You could become lonely, fearful, like you could become joyless, defensive. The list goes on and on. If you're refusing to forgive someone, you can become those things, and that's not being the best version of yourself, right? Prideful people set themselves up as a higher judge than God himself, who's continuously, willing and waiting to forgive you, right? And me and most people know that, I do relationships God way. So with that being said, God is always willing to forgive us, right? He's not holding on to what we've done wrong if we come to him and we ask for forgiveness, right? And when you forgive somebody, you're not always going to, have a conversation with that person. It's just an internal thing where you decide, hey, look, I'm not going to hold on to this anger anymore, because if I hold on to it, it could be self-destructing. I could start not being my best character self, and I can start sabotaging other future relationships, whether it's romantic, whether it's business, whether it's friendship relationships, because I'm holding on to something, a past hurt, versus saying, hey, look, you know what? I'm going to choose to forgive this person. I'm not condoning their actions, but I'm going to internally make peace with this situation. And once you're able to make peace with the situation, you are able to move on and create better relationships with other people.
Yeah, no, that was, I feel like that was a great explanation. I mean, just like that metaphor you gave, it's pretty clear that if you are holding up that resentment and you're keeping it inside your body, a lot of people feel like it'll hurt the other person because they're kind of wishing bad things or ill will on them, but they don't understand that all of that is just being experienced in their own body, and that's causing their body harm and sickness. So it's like, even if it's not for the sake of the other person, for the sake of yourself, it's like forgiveness is, in my opinion, key, if you agree.
Yes, definitely. And one of the things that you said that I forgot to mention, but I'm glad you mentioned, is you're right. It causes stress in the body, and stress is like, I think it's like in the top 5 killers in America. So if you're not forgiving somebody and that causes stress in your body, and stress, it can lead to diseases. It can lead to all types of stuff that is not healthy for your body. Well, I wouldn't say disease, but malfunctions in your body that shouldn't be there because you're harboring this resentment that you have for this person.
Exactly. And I think that just people knowing that, it could really help their lives take a turn for, the better. Just knowing that even if it's not for whatever situation they've gone through that they've been hurt from, even if it's not to really just move away from that situation, as forgiveness should be, to just be completely done with that. It's like, you don't want to let that person still have a hold of you, still have power over your life and your thoughts, your days, your decisions, because you are constantly thinking about that person, even though the situation is already done so far down the line. There's some people who have these thoughts or ill will towards people who are out of their life, and it's been 3, 5 years, 10 years down the line, and they can't even really live their lives anymore. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
And I mean, I don't know if you have any like personal stories or anything that you can kind of give to the audience that kind of explains what it's like to forgive someone and what kind of feelings come out of forgiving people.
Yeah, definitely. So I do have a story. I have a personal story about myself. As I told you in the beginning of the podcast, I was in 2 long-term relationships, right? And the first relationship, I was with this woman for 8 years, okay? And she cheated on me with 13 different men. 13 different men, right? So imagine the type of resentment,
Man.
the type of hurt that I had inside myself, right? But I had to find it in myself, like I said, not to condone it, but to forgive and make peace with that. Because if I did not do that, right, it would affect any relationship that I had moving forward, because I would start to be like, oh, all women are cheaters, and,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. So it's not easy. So what I like to tell a lot of my clients is that's something that you have to feel through. You have to go through it. You can't ignore it. Right. So when you're forgiving somebody, you're going to feel these feelings of hurt. You're going to feel these feelings of, resentment towards them. You're going to have ill feelings towards them, but you have to make a conscious decision to say, hey, look, I understand that I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling hurt. And even in an instance, you can scream, I'm pretty sure you've probably seen it on TV where, somebody's so mad or so hurt that they grab the pillow and they scream into the pillow.
Mm-hmm.
Or, if you want, you could write a note, to that person, but never give it to that person, releasing all your emotions towards that person to let that go. So some of the feelings that come out of forgiveness is, the fact that you have to acknowledge that, hey, look, I'm hurt. You have to acknowledge that, hey, look, I am hurt. And if I continue to allow this, it truly, truly can alter the way that I live. So hopefully that gives you, that answers what you were asking me.
Yeah, no, that was very, very powerful, a very powerful story and example. I mean, I don't think that, like, as a person who listened to your story, it would be hard for me not to believe that you don't understand the power of forgiveness, just because, like, everything that you're doing now, it could have been, a result of that experience, and like all the emotion and creative energy that you have used from that situation is now causing you to become such a successful person, helping other people heal from relationships. And I think that's amazing, just to say.
Right. And I just want to add one more thing, because, a lot of people think that forgiveness is a place of weakness, and it's really not a place of weakness, right? It's actually a place of strength, because it takes more strength to say, hey, look, I'm going to forgive this person, no matter if they deserve it or not. It takes more strength to do that. So that shows a lot about your character, your mind, and your soul. So I just wanted to make sure that I put that out there.
Yes, most definitely. Okay, well, the second question is, and I'm sure, and you've touched this a little bit in some of your other answers, but it's, would you say that there is power in forgiveness?
Yes, absolutely. There's power in forgiveness, because one of the things is when you're able to forgive, right, that sharpens your character, right? Because like I said, and I'm going to keep going back to this because I want all the listeners to understand that we're not condoning the action, right? But when I say it sharpens your character, you're able to take a blow and get back up from it, and every blow is going to be slightly different, right? Every moment of forgiveness, some might take, longer than others, but the power in forgiveness is not about them, right? It's actually about you. And then I'm going to go back, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but like I said, I do relationship God's way. And the Bible, it talks about the importance of forgiveness, right? In one of the scriptures, it says, forgive your brothers and sisters, because if you don't, I won't forgive you. So to me, that right there shows that there's so much power in forgiveness, because God says, hey, look, I'm commanding you to forgive others, right? Because if you don't, I won't forgive you. And to me, that speaks power all in itself.
No, that I completely agree. There's a lot of power in that, and there's a lot of Christian listeners, so I know that they'll appreciate your use of scripture to stand behind everything that you're saying, because it just solidifies the importance of forgiveness. So I definitely appreciate you using that and not being afraid to put that out there, because I think that is a very powerful thing, to have that relationship, with in spirituality with God, and then to also apply those things to your relationship. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
So question number 3, what would you say are your steps to forgiving someone? And I know you said your story and everything, so I kind of just want to know what your thought process was during that time, and what did it look like during those steps in the process when you were working through that situation in order to get to that point where you felt free of it and you felt like you could really fully forgive that person.
Right. Okay, so, one of the things that I want to share is, like, the only way, you can accept new joy, which it could be a new relationship or anything like that, and happiness into your life, is you got to make space for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if your heart is filled up with pain and hurt, how can you be open to anything new, right? So one of the steps that I teach a lot of my clients is, number one, you got to make the decision to let it go, right? Things don't just disappear on their own, right? You need to make a commitment to say, hey, look, I'm going to let this go. If you don't make this conscious choice up front, you could end up self-sabotaging anything moving forward, right? And then number 2, express your pain and your responsibility, right? Like I said in the very beginning, right? I could have blamed her for what she did, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I accepted my responsibility in that. And one of the responsibilities that I was able to accept is, guess what? I wasn't around the way she needed me to do, needed me to be. I would put work first. You know what I'm saying? Like, I would always be like, oh, sweetheart, I can't do this because I got to be at the office. When in all actuality, I didn't really have to be at the office. I was just a workaholic. So, that drove her. That was one of the, the factors that drove her away, and just not being there for her emotionally, where I could sit down and I can talk and I can listen to her. Like, I wasn't a good listener at one point in time, right? I was one of those people that would listen to reply, and that was that. So expressing your pain and your responsibility in the action, right? So step number 3, right? Stop being a victim and blaming others. And that goes back to point number 2, where you got to take responsibility for what you've done.
Right.
Step number 4, you want to focus on the present, the here, the now, and the joy that you can experience. Now is the time to let go. You got to let go of the past and stop reliving it, because if you keep reliving it, it's almost like putting a Band-Aid on, right? And then ripping it off every time and expecting your cut to heal.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Stop telling yourself the story, of what happened. It's forever. You're having that victim mentality, right? You can't undo the past. All you can do is make today the best day of your life, and every day moving forward. So don't focus on the past, focus on the present, the here and the now, right? And then forgive them and yourself, right? And I keep going back to this. This is not condoning, right? I want people to understand this. It's not condoning. You're not forgetting the other person's bad behaviors. You could have a conversation. They can say sorry and they can really mean it, and you could forgive them. Or if you don't have that conversation, you have to find it in yourself to say, hey, look, you know what? I'm going to forgive this person. although I might not continue down, whatever relationship I have with this person, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a business partnership, because of their character, but I making the conscious and deliberate choice to actually forgive them. And so those are basically my 5 steps on how to forgive somebody. And one of the things, and I think I mentioned this in another question, is like when you express your pain. One of the best ways I find that clients have been giving me feedback is to write that letter to whoever hurt them, to get all their emotions, all their anger, all their resentment, all their ill feelings out, of their body. It's almost like a release. Oh, and other thing, prayer helps a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to God, ask God to soften your heart to be able to forgive. So,
Man, people are going to have to keep rewinding that 5 steps portion, because that was a lot of just value. I would have to say, like, even me listening to it, I gained a lot of value, and I could remember myself when I was going through those that portion of time when I was forgiving, the person that I was needing to forgive. And it's just something that you said that really resonated with me, was that you have to forgive yourself too, and that you have to, live in the moment. I mean, I think people really forget that once things are done, like, the past is the past, and all you can do is take advantage of the day, like you said, and, live your best day. And what I think is cool is, and I want, the lovebirds to realize this, is whenever you do meet that person that's right for you, you are no longer really thinking about that person who hurts you. It's like, as soon as you move on and you find the person that you truly love, that person that, God has planned for you, all this stuff that you went through in the past is just kind of eradicated. You're able to just enjoy that person and love in the moment, and you're not thinking about all the stuff that happened to you. So it's like, as these things, it's like, why would you continue to live in that hurt? Like you said, why would you continue to take the Band-Aid off and not let it heal? If you
right.
have a plan and purpose to be with someone that is going to love you for you, you should be expecting someone who's going to love you and treat you right, and you shouldn't live so much in a hurt. So that, I definitely felt what you were saying in that sense.
Thanks. Okay, great.
So I want to hear a little bit more about your book and how you have worked with couples in the past, and what your book literally. I just want to know a little bit more about your book and your 7 steps.
I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
Yeah, I think we got cut out a little bit. I want to know a little bit more about your book and your 7 steps in revolutionizing relationships. If you could share a little bit about that.
Yes, definitely. So what I've done, it's just a collection of me interviewing very successful married couples. And when I say successfully married, that have been happily married, because you could be married and not happy, correct?
Yeah, correct, for sure.
Right. So I interviewed them, which they've been married. I think the least amount of time was, I think it was 15 years was the least amount of time. And the most amount of time was, I think it was 42 years. So one of the things that I did was I interviewed them and I asked them, certain questions to see if they all had, certain things in common in regards to a better connection with their spouse. So the things that I found 7 things. And one of them was to accept them for who they are. And I'm talking about married couples right here. So, dating, it's a little bit different, right?
Right.
But once you decide to say, hey, look, I do, right? You have to, you make these vows to death do us part, all this other stuff, right? Now, in the Bible, it talks about basically the only grounds for divorce is adultery, where you're going off and you're, having sexual relations, cheating, or whatever the case may be, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you decided to get married, right, you have to accept them for who they are, flaws and all. Now, that's not to say that you can't, uh, give them constructive criticism where you grow in these areas, but you can't change somebody, unless they truly want to change. So one of the things you want to do is you want to sit down. If something's truly bothering you, you need to be able to communicate that to the person, and you need to sit down and say, hey, look, babe, sweetheart, honey, whatever you guys call each other, and say, hey, look, this is really affecting me. Is there anything that we could do? I'm not trying to change you as a person, but is there anything that we could do that we can kind of meet in the middle? And you have to be prepared for that person to say no. And if that is the case, you have to accept them for who they are because you decided to marry them. And during the dating process, I like to call that the evaluation stage. You evaluated a lot of these things and you made the conscious effort to say, hey, look, I want to marry this person, and I do. So now you have to accept them for who they are. And then number two, make your appreciation known. You want to foster what I like to call an appreciation environment, right? Because when you show your spouse or your partner that you appreciate them, they draw closer to you. And I don't know if you would agree with that, but if you're in a relationship, right, and you're showing this woman that you truly, truly appreciate her, right? And you don't have to be buying her things, but words work just as well, as well as with action.
Mm-hmm.
If you're telling her and you're showing her that you appreciate her or him, it draws that person closer to you because we all have this longing to be loved, to be appreciated. Wouldn't you agree?
I would 100% agree.
Great. And so the third thing is actually being authentic, right? So a lot of us, we get into these relationships and we try to be somebody that we're truly, truly not, right?
Mm-hmm.
We need to be our authentic self. And the reason why I say that is because when you are authentic, that's what builds intimacy. And a lot of people seem to think that intimacy has to deal strictly with sex, which that is not the case. Intimacy, the definition of that is closeness, familiarity, right?
Yep.
So if you're authentic, right, that person can love the real you. But if you're not authentic, that person cannot love the real you. They're loving a representation of you, but that's not the real you. So being authentic is probably my favorite chapter because that is you truly being your true self, being transparent, right? Number 4 is embracing the differences, right? Prime example, I was with a woman who moves kind of slow. Me, I like things a lot more fast paced, right? And it used to get on my nerves that she moves so slow. But once I started to embrace the difference, right? I started to see that, guess what? It is good to slow down every so often. Why? Because if I'm always on the go and I'm always going fast, I forget things, I lose things, so to have that balance where, hey, look, she's like, hey, babe, slow it down a little bit, and I really embrace that for, what, this could be a good thing. It's not my way all the time. It's not my way or the highway. It's, hey, look, I have a certain way of doing things that works, for me at certain times, but then there's certain things that might be different in her aspect that could be beneficial to me as well. So embracing the differences is pretty big. And being supportive, that's number 5. Right? Being supportive of your partner's dreams, being supportive of your partner's decisions. And even if you don't like the decision, that's when communication comes into play, where you have to say, hey, look, I don't necessarily agree with this decision, But if this is something that you truly, truly, truly want to do or need to do, how can I how can I support you? Because we always hear the saying, with you, having your podcast and me having my business as a relationship coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we tell somebody, our dreams and our goals, right? There could be dream killers out there.
Oh
Right?
yeah, for sure.
Where they're like, they might say, oh, you know what, your podcast is not going to be the #1 relationship podcast. They're gonna say, Steven, you're never going to be a top relationship coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
imagine if that was in your own relationship.
Yeah.
If that was in your own relationship, what is that going to do? That's going to draw you further from your spouse. That's not going to allow you to have a better connection with your spouse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree completely.
And number 6, right? Understand their humanity, right? Like, we're all humans, right? We don't need to treat somebody like they're a god or they're less than. We all make mistakes, and that's where we have to have grace. Where when somebody makes a mistake, and this ties into forgiveness, right? If somebody makes a mistake, we have to show them grace, and especially if it wasn't on purpose. Right? We have to understand that they're human. We have to understand that they make mistakes, and we cannot hold them to the standard that we would hold God. God is the only perfect, Jesus walking this earth was the only perfect human being.
Mm-hmm.
You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. So we have to understand that our partner is not perfect, and we can't expect them to be perfect. So we have to allow them to make mistakes, and we have to give them the grace needed for forgiveness. And then last but not least, right? You want to transform your demands into objectives, right? If I'm in a relationship and I'm demanding, my woman, do this all the time, do this, or the woman demanding that I do this all the time, versus, hey, making it an objective, like, a topic that we can kind of work through,
Mm-hmm.
That's going to push somebody away. Nobody wants, well, I won't say nobody, but the people that I know don't want to be in a demanding relationship where they're constantly demanding from you and they're not giving back to you. So if there is an issue, hey, look, we put this on the table and we say, okay, how can we come together and make this an objective and solve this problem instead of me demanding it be this way or demanding it be that way? Because if you keep demanding, you are going to push your partner further away. And if you are objective, that means you guys are working together as a team. It's us and not, hey, this is my way, that's, or the highway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So those are the 7 character traits that I found when I interviewed these married couples, that all stood out. And there's other ones as well, but these were almost like the 7 that had because I think I interviewed 55 couples, and these are, like I said, these are the characteristics that stood out amongst the 55 that I interviewed.
Well, like I said, I'm definitely going to check that book out, and I hope everyone that is listening can too. It's Revolutionize Your Relationship, 7 Fundamentals to a Better Connection with Your Spouse. So all of you married lovebirds, please check this book out by Stephen Robinson. I actually may purchase it as soon as we get off of this. So that was I feel like that was an amazing value for anyone, even outside of marriage, as I'm not married yet. And,
Right.
if you're not married, it does help to get some knowledge and understanding before you make that decision,
Right.
So,
right. Because I feel like all of those apply, maybe not number 1, accept them for who they are. Because if you're dating, you don't have to accept them. Well, I won't, you know what, let me rephrase that. I won't say that you don't have to accept them, because they're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
So accept them as a human being, but you don't have to accept them talking down to you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to accept, I like to call it non-negotiables, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there's certain things that are non-negotiable when you're dating or looking for a partner, then don't settle. Don't accept it. Don't accept that. The how would I say it? I guess like the character. You accept them as a human, but don't accept the character traits that they, give to you that could be harmful to you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I definitely do. Do you have any last tips for the lovebirds? Like anything that you feel like would help them out in their relationships?
Yeah. So one of the things that I like to say is that if I ever date a woman, right, regardless of whether we marry or not,
Mm-hmm.
I want her to be able to say, hey, I'm a better person for having spent time in proximity with him, right? And I believe that if everybody had that mentality going into the relationship to say, hey, look, I don't ever want this person to leave worse or hurt, even though we don't, get married or go to the next step. But I want them to be better for spending with me. I think that we would have a better relationship in our society, because that means everybody is caring.
Yep.
Everybody cares about, hey, look, I want to bring out the best in you, from what I can do, and like I said, if you don't get married and they move on to somebody else, that person should want to bring out the best in that person. If you're not ready to do that, then stay single. Do not get into a relationship if you are not ready to invest and be a servant, but not a servant to where you're a slave, but serving each other. If you're not ready to do that, if you're not ready to be what I like to call hot, honest, open, and transparent, don't get into a relationship.
Hot is what again?
It's honest, open, and transparent.
Honest, open, and transparent. Hot. That I'm writing that down. I don't know about you guys listening. I'm writing that down. My last thing, I know that I said if you have any last tips, but I do think that it is important for those listeners who are single. What would you say for those who are single, if they aren't ready? How can they prepare themselves? I know you said, servitude and being a servant, though. What is your take on singleness?
All right, so singleness, number one, is not a disease, right? Singleness is probably the best time in your life because you can work on yourself, right? You don't have to account for anybody to that magnitude. So if you're not ready, then what you need to do is become, I won't say the best version of yourself because you can always get better, but you want to continuously work on yourself. You want to see where you fall short. And what I mean by that is start to really pay attention to some of the character traits that you have. How are you dealing with your friends? How are you dealing with your family? If your friend says something, do you get quick angry, right? If you get quick angry, then, hey, look, this is something that you need to work on, right? If you're selfish, right? If it's all about you, guess what? That's something that you need to work on, because being selfish is not going to work in any relationship, no matter if it's a romantic relationship, friendship, business relationship. It's not going to work. So you need to be that person that you're searching for.
I completely agree, brother. I completely agree. Well, lovebirds. I mean, you heard it from an amazing relationship speaker. If you guys have any questions about today's episode, for me, Steven, you can message them directly to the Relationships Podcast. Steven will be on there also. You can message them and I can shoot them to him directly. And you can also reach out to the 24/7 Good Relationships hotline number. That is 309-603-3511. Again, that's 309-603-3511. Thank you, Lovebirds, for listening as always. And thank you, Steven, for being a guest and bringing out the heat.
Well, thank you once again for having me on your show. Like I said, I was very, very ecstatic to work with you because your content is just amazing. You're putting out great knowledge for the whole relationship community, you know, for the singles, you know, the people that are in relationships. So you're always dropping gems. So it was such an honor to be a guest on your show today.
Man, I appreciate that. And I mean, you already know we're going to collaborate a lot more in the future, brother.
Definitely.
Well, that's all we got for you today, Lovebirds. And as always, stay blessed, not stressed.